Hello, my name is Ashley Basham, and today I'm going to be talking about Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 in our textbook. And before I really get into the textbook, I want to look at two key things that were first introduced right whenever you open the chapter, and that is figure 9.1 and 9.2. Now, these two figures both are different but have several similarities, but the first one I'm going to talk about is figure 9.1, and this is the Understanding by Design matrix. It's kind of the roadmap for the textbook, and we're going to focus on stage 3, which is what stage chapter 9 and 10 usually consist of, and that's because in the previous chapters we talked about stage 1, stage 2, now we're talking about stage 3. And in stage 3, one of the big things it's asking and big thing it's talking about is what learning activities and teaching promote understanding, knowledge, skill, students' interest, and excellence. So what can we do as a teacher to take our students? How can we hook and hold them? How can we get their attention? Teach them what they need to know. How are we going to get this knowledge? As a teacher, you are filled with all this knowledge, all this stuff you want your students to know. So you know the knowledge, you want to get your students to learn the knowledge. So the goal is to get from the knowledge in your head to the knowledge in the student's head. And that's kind of what the third section is mostly about, is how do you get knowledge from point A to point B, from person 1 to person 2, and how do you assess this? How do you understand this? So that's the first figure that I wanted to point out. And then in figure 9.2, I wanted to point out this is the logic and background designs, including in stage 3. This is kind of like the nitty gritty, like if the desired results is for learning 2, and then you'd fill in the blank. And then you go into stage 2, which is then you need to evidence of the student's ability to, which is kind of the assessment, and then you have the learning activities needed to, which is after the assessment. Yes, you can teach your students and you can assess their students, but what are you going to do to make them remember it? Like homework, I don't promote a lot of homework, but homework, practice things, like if you have free time, practice periods, games, especially like if you're in a math or a history class or a science class, that hands-on games is really what those students are looking for to help them remember. I know there are different types of learning styles, but no matter what learning style you are, if you are able to physically touch it, if you're physically able to see it, and if you're visually able to comprehend it, that is what you need for learning. And so that's kind of what the second one was about. The second chart was about. And so now I'm going to go into really kind of the nitty gritty of chapter 9. I just wanted to point out those two, what would you call them? Those two tables, figures. Just wanted to really go ahead and point those out and something just to read and look at and understand, because that will really tell you where you're at, where you need to be, and what you want to know. So in chapter 9, one of the biggest things is before you get the knowledge to the students, you need to engage and affect. Like you need to engage them. What are the effects of it? And these two terms sound so similar, but they're so different. And when you're engaging the students, that means you have your attention. You have it's almost like a game, like, oh, how do you get to the next step? Oh, what's the next step? So it's almost like a mystery, kind of like a guessing game. And then you have their attention. They want to know what's coming up next. It's like a cliffhanger. You want to see you're on the edge. You want to know. You're curious. You're discoveраtive. Now, the effective method is you have clear-cut goals. You know what they want to do. You know how to get to the goals. You just got to get from point A to point B, clear-cut path. With effectiveness, it's kind of, you got to go around some hidden corners. You might have a wall you have to figure out how to go through. With effectiveness, nope, you have point A and you go to point B. I've actually taught both methods before. I think all teachers have taught both methods before. If you haven't taught in both methods, then, well, I don't know how. Because effective, that's more like, okay, I'm going to give them a note sheet. They're going to need to fill in the blank note sheets. Whenever I taught last year for an 8th grade math class, I had these awesome note sheets. And what it was is it was a front and back filled with notes, but there were missing words. So it would give a definition but miss like 3 words in the definition. So the students had to pay attention to my lesson and fill in the blank. If we were talking about a graph, they had to put the graph on the notes. It's not my ideal way of teaching. I didn't quite enjoy it. I wish I could have done more, but if you really need them to get to know the information in a quick, efficient way so they know what they're doing, they know how to grab it, then that's the best method. Engaging students that's more of like a lesson, like a fun game, or it's something that's not just, I have notes. Oh crap, I have notes. So engaging, I did another activity towards the end of my time, and it was quite fun. We were learning about slope, and we were learning about how to write slope, like y equals mx plus b, and we were learning how to graph slope. And so what they did is we had these giant poster boards, and they were in groups of 4, and they had to take the graph, and then they had to take the equation, which is y equals mx plus b, and they had to match them together. And everybody was running around the room. They were trying to figure it out. It was about 2 days of getting this huge poster board put together, and the students loved it. We put it in the hallways afterwards, and everybody got to see what they got to do with these big old poster boards. And I thought this was amazing, and I thought it was fun, and that's more of engaging because they're interacting with each other, they're interacting with the activity, they're interacting with the subject. It is all in one together. The next thing, and kind of the last thing that I really wanted to point out in this chapter is the where to, and it's WHERETO, and that is what this book calls the where to, which is where and why. Like, where are you going? Why are you going that direction? Then you have to, once you figure out a direction, how do you hook and hold the students? Once you hook and hold the students, then what kind of equipment do you need to get there? Do you need a pencil, pen? Do you need former knowledge? Do you need anything that will help you understand the material better? From there, you need to rethink, reflect, revise. This is why we say show your work in math. This is not just an English thing. When you don't need, you can use it in English, you can use it in math, you can use it in science, but one thing that this means is you rethink it. So if you got a question wrong, go back, look at your work that we hounded into you to do the work. That's why you need to show it. So look at your work, reflect on what you maybe went wrong. It might just mean you need to flip a sign from plus to minus. It might not be a big deal. And then fix it. That's kind of what the R stands for. I used to have a lot of students who used to say, I'm so smart, I don't need to show my work. And then whenever we take a test, they don't show their work. They can't reflect, rethink, and revise because there's no work to reflect. It's all in your mind, but you can't remember because that was 3 days ago and we slept since then. Sorry, I really am very passionate about the R because I think that's, when you look at the where to's, that's almost my key important one, is to rethink, relook, and revise, because you cannot get anywhere without making a mistake, because you need mistakes so you can learn. And that really helps point that out and helps the students make a mistake. It's okay, we'll fix it, move on to the next thing. The next one is the E, which is evaluate. And that's kind of your lessons, kind of your assignments, kind of your like small little quizzes. Evaluate like your warm-ups. How are they? Where are they going? Even they can evaluate how they're doing. In my IASD, whenever the students take a test, we have them fill out a chart stating, okay, so they were at 40% the first time they took the test, not so great. But then when they take it again, they're at 60%. Okay, so what do we do in between the 40 and the 60, and how do we get higher than 60? And that's just kind of evaluate your progress, keep an eye on how you're doing. The next thing is the T, which is tailored. Everybody is different. We are not cookie cutters. We are not, even cookies aren't the same, but you can't just take a cookie cutter, cut them out. Oh, this student is like every other student. No, we are all different learning styles, different people. We need to tailor the assignment to the students, to what their needs are. If you have a lot of kinesthetic learners, then you have your assignment reflect that. If you have a lot of gifted and talented, then you don't just need 2 + 2 = 4. You need something way more higher level thinking, like a word problem or something. You don't need to put it plain cut and dry because they're going to look at you. This is easy. I'm done. I'm bored. Leads to problems. No, you need to tailor it to where their learning styles are in the classroom. And then you need to be organized. I know a lot of people look at me weird because I'm a neat freak, but there's a reason for that. Because if you're not organized, if your life is chaotic, if everything you do is chaotic, if your desk is chaotic, if if you don't have everything where it needs to be, then your classroom's going to be chaotic. Your students are going to be chaotic. You need to organize. I know as a teacher, that's like, oh, well, I can't organize my desk. I got too many things. Yes, I know, but the 5 minutes it takes to fix your desk, incorporate help. Have your students help. I had a elective class at the end of the day, and if we got done with everything, I had them help me organize. They enjoyed it. They said, oh, hey, we get to, put it in this bin, put it in this bin. We make a game out of it. I had some students after class that would just come in there and sit because they didn't want to go to the after-school program, and they would love to help me clean my room, help me organize. I know not all students are going to do that. I know that's not. But if you have the time, keep them organized, because that way you're not chaotic, stressed. Well, where'd this go? But stay organized. And the last thing I really wanted to point out in this chapter and really go into detail is the hook and hold. Because you need to hook your students. If you don't have your students' attentions, they don't have your attention. It's a two-way street. You have their attention, they have your attention. You need to hook your students. You can't just say, okay, we're going to learn about X, Y, and Z. Here's a paper, here's the notes, let's get started. They're not interested. They could care less. It is just a class that they're taking. It doesn't matter to them, will not matter to them, they'll forget it. So you need to find a way to make it be rememberable. Hook your students. Find something that will make them think, oh, well, this was fun. Or have them think, oh, well, how can I do this? Make it a mystery, make it a game. They love activities like this. I've talked about it, I don't know if I've talked about it in this class, but I've talked about it in other classes. There's a game that we play called Life. They enjoy it because they get to see, oh, well, what might my future hold? How will I take this? And it gives them the choice to make options, and kind of puts the learning in their control on thinking, well, what can I do next? How can I learn more? And that's just something that as a teacher, you can't teach your kids if you can't hook your kids. You can do everything in the world. You can have the best lesson plans out there. You can have the most organized room. It can look like something off Pinterest. But if you can't hook and hold your students to the material, then they're not gonna learn it. It's not gonna, you lost the battle there. To start the battle, you gotta hook and hold your students. That's the one thing you have to do to teach your students. And that's something I highly emphasize, and that's why I'm kind of passionate about this, because these where to's is your blueprint for how you teach your class and how you get the information from your head to the student's head. And that's what you need these characteristics. So then I'm going to go into chapter 10. So looking at chapter 10 has a lot of graphs, has a lot of fun information that I love to point out. I was looking through this in my textbook, and I was noticing all of the fun, tables it had, and so much information. I'm dyslexic, have a little trouble with reading, but I can see things in a table. That's just part of my dyslexia. When I see a table, I gravitate towards it because they give out so much information without having to comb through. And the first table I really wanted to look at was uncover and coverage. And this kind of is there's a fine line between coverage and coverage and uncoverage. There's kind of a very fine line there. With coverage, you need to make sure you have all your I's, all your T's dotted. The text is the syllabus, you need the assessments, you need to have the assignments, the lesson plans, uncoverage. There might be some things missing, there might be some holes you need to fill. You might not get all the way there, and just having that, making sure that your lessons are full of, understanding and getting that full coverage. And figure 10.1, it really goes over, it has two distinct coverage versus uncoverage, and the text that it's based in also, if you read down further below, it talks a lot more about it, and how you just need to make sure, like with uncovered, some of the sections of the text it states the idea, it states the point, but it doesn't really state the point, if that makes any sense. Like, it tells you kind of what you need to know, but it leaves out the background knowledge or the gray areas or the what ifs. And that's where coverage covers everything. You have your X, Y, and Z. There's no questions asked. This is what it is. And I really enjoyed reading that section. The next thing that I really thought was interesting, and actually with the assignment in general, I all thought it was very interesting, is we're talking about these 3 different types of teachers. And one thing that really got me was these 3 different types of teachers. And whenever I was reading the assignment, it says to choose one, but when I read about these teachers, if you're a teacher in a classroom, you can have strong characteristics of each one of these traits, but when you're a teacher, you need to make sure you have all these traits, and I thought all these traits were good because depending on the lesson, depending on what you're teaching, each one of these traits might view strongly to the other one, but you need to have almost all of these to make, a rounded lesson. And the first thing that I really looked at when it came to the 3 different types of teachers, you have I have trouble saying this word, so bear with me. Didactic or direct instruction teacher. So these types of teachers, their lectures, questionnaires, the notes. Previously, I talked about how I used to give my students these notes, fill in the blank notes, and then we do assignment afterwards. That's a direct instruction teacher. You have the information, you know what they want to learn, we're going to learn it. And then you have the next type of teacher, which I call the fun teacher, which is the facilitative or constructive methods, meaning you have games, you have discussions, you have experiments. This is a great one for science. You have concept attainment, you have cooperative learning, you have groups, you have guided inquiry, problem-based learning. This is it's the fun teacher. You have all the games, you have all the you have the projects, you have the group learning, you have the discussions, you have the think, pair, shares, you have everything going on. It's almost like organized chaos is basically what it is. It's just organized, glorious chaos. Where the students are doing their own learning. They are, writing out their ideas. They're thinking, they're questioning, they're asking questions, they're thinking of answers, they're discussing with the teacher, with their students. And then the last one is coaching, which this one is feedback, guidance, giving them courage. A lot of the students who are below average need this type of learning because they need the coaching. Coaching is great for special ed classrooms because they need that extra help. You can do it. And they can. This isn't just words. They can do it, but they need to hear that encouragement. They need to hear that they can do it. They need to hear that we think they can do it. So if we think they can do it, then they think they can do it. So they need that little extra coaching. And like I said, a well-rounded teacher and lessons will have all of these combined, but some of them might be more than the other ones. I know in the math class I taught last year, I was very direct instruction with a little bit of coaching and with a little bit of facilitative or constructive methods. And that's because my students were behind. I needed to give them direct instructions fast, quickly, because they were 2 months behind. But then whenever we got caught up, then we could be more, have constructive methods. Then we can be a little bit more, have like discussions, have projects, have group activities, have group discussions. And so it just depends on what situation you're put in, what you're doing. But the best instruction you can give your students is a little bit of everything. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You have to kind of spread them around. And so I just thought, reading this, it was actually kind of interesting to see that they actually have names for these teachers and different types of teachers. And the last thing I want to talk about is the techniques for checking for understanding, because this is kind of the last thing. For this third stage, we talk about getting the information from our heads to the students' heads and getting them to learn the information. But how do you know they have it? And that's kind of a question a lot of teachers ask. And that's one of probably the most common questions that is asked in the schools that I hear, is how do we know the students have it? How do we know the students did well, learned the material, grasped the material? And this kind of little, it's in figure 10.5, and it gives you techniques for checking for understanding. So like questionnaires. Questionnaires are something that a lot of teachers go to, questionnaires and tests. And what do they understand? How do they understand it? You could do like a 1-minute essay, please reflect on what we learned today. That would be great for history. What did you learn about the revolution? I don't know, I'm not a history major. And then you give fill in the blank questions. Like give a definition, and then they have fill in the rest of the definition, or fill in maybe a word or two. See if they understand the definition. And that's kind of what the 2 chapters were mainly about. And I think the where to's is what really sums up the chapters, and how we get from point A to point B. How do we get our students to understand the material we would like them to get? How do we get our students to even soak in the material? We need to treat our students like a sponge. We're the water. We need to get the water to the sponge. And so we need to figure out how we're going to get the water to the sponge so the sponge can soak it up. And that's kind of what this whole chapter was about, was the process of taking what we have, our water, our information as a teacher, and taking it to the sponge, the students, and having them soak it up. And then how we know, is it fully soaked up, fully squishy? Are we comprehending everything? And I think out of all the chapters, this really, as a teacher, really helped me kind of understand and see the process. We always talk about the process. We always talk about, okay, we got lesson plans done. Okay, we're going to teach. Okay, we're going to assess, and we're done. This really broke it down further than that. This really gave you those blueprints, those roadmaps to get from point A to point B. And that is all for chapter 9 and 10. I hope you stay safe. Goodbye.